What's up, y'all? Jared Sandler with you, getting ready for Rangers-Mariners tonight. Broadcasting, of course, right now, live from Nana's house with cousin Joey over my right shoulder. But before we get into tonight's game, let's talk some trade deadline stuff. First of all, you go to Twitter, at Jared Sandler. I've tweeted this week's Sandbox blog entry. We talk a lot about the trade deadline. Of course, with the Rangers now 6.5 games back of that second wild card spot, it looks more and more like they're not going to buy, and perhaps more and more like Mike Minor could get moved. And, it seems like their options with that are you either trade Mike Minor, you don't trade him at all, or the third option is you sign him to an extension. The trade option and the extension option are tough to discuss because from the extension standpoint, we don't know what Mike Minor would want. We know what maybe we would say would be worth it for the Rangers. And on the trade front, we know what we would want Mike Minor to bring back, but we don't know what the offers are. Maybe they're better than what we expect. Maybe they're worse than what we expect. From a contract standpoint, maybe Mike Minor won't sign anything less than 5 extra years on top of his current deal. Maybe he'd be open to 2 years. Maybe nothing less than $20 million. Maybe he'd be open to $15 million. It's just so tough to know. But those are their 3 paths with Mike Minor, whose contract, as it currently is constructed, expires after the 2020 season. It seems, in talking to folks, that Mike Minor is viewed so highly around the league, and you consider the supply and demand of the crop of pitchers who are made available, that he could bring back a pretty significant package in return. And the front office obviously has to weigh that against some of the other options. Now, with the keep Mike Minor side of things, one thing that the front office has to consider is who is Mike Minor going to be over the long haul? Not just this year. He's obviously having a tremendous year. If the season ended right now, he'd be in consideration for the Cy Young. Probably not the front runner, but he'd be in consideration. But what's he going to be next year? And if the Rangers were to explore an extension the year after and the year after, and there's no way to know definitively, but they've got all sorts of models and numbers and data to try and project that stuff out. It's not foolproof, it's not perfect, but it gives them an idea and every team an idea what to kind of expect, how to value guys and whatnot. Mike's 31 years old, and at the time of his new contract, he'll be 33, already having undergone an arm surgery. So those are different things that the Rangers have to weigh. We can talk more about Mike Minor, and I imagine we will. That's probably going to dominate the conversation over the next week or so, or unless a move happens before then. But I want to just quickly touch on some of the other guys. Let's start with Shin-Soo Choo. The Rangers aren't going to get a whole lot in the way of prospects in return for Choo. If they were to move Choo, it would be because a team was willing to pay more than half of his contract, probably 75% of his contract, and maybe a small-time prospects thrown in. But from the Rangers' standpoint, I don't know that they're necessarily pumped about paying for Shin-Soo Choo to get on base 38% of the time for someone else. I think they love the veteran presence, how he carries out exactly what this coaching staff is trying to preach. And on top of all that, he's remained a really, really good player. So I'm sure there have been conversations, but I don't know, just because of how the playoff teams, the contending teams are set in the outfield, I don't know that there's enough incentive for one of those teams to say, yeah, we'll take on most of his remaining contract. I don't know that that's out there. Hunter Pence. We all love Hunter, right? He's been so great. I don't know that he's going to bring back a whole lot. He might be a player to be named later, or maybe just a step above type of return, because right now he can't even really play in the field because of the groin injury, and that will change as he gets healthier. But again, same thing. A lot of contending teams are good in the outfield. Maybe they're looking for depth. Maybe they're looking for a platoon guy, and Hunter could be that guy. But again, you're not going to pay a whole lot for a guy who you're just going to start against lefties, or who isn't for sure a middle-of-the-order bat that's going to be injected into your lineup. And so at that point, I wonder if Hunter is just more valuable to the Rangers than he would be to another team. And if that's the case, it doesn't make any sense, because like Choo, he's a great veteran presence, a leader in that clubhouse. Even though he hasn't been around long, he is a leader in that clubhouse. And he's a free agent at the end of the year. It'd be great if the Rangers brought him back, if they were able to find a role. Danny Santana's interesting because there is going to be interest in Danny. There always is interest around this time for productive utility players who are also switch hitters. But Danny's under control, and I wonder if the Rangers view Danny as a part of their future. Not necessarily someone you're going to build around, but someone who they'd like to be in the lineup, a part of the mix next year, in which case that raises the bar for what the Rangers would want for Danny Santana. I don't think Danny Santana is going to get in the way of the Rangers making a move if they can get a really robust return package and the other team saying, well, we want Danny Santana to be thrown in there, and if you throw him in there, we'll give you prospect X, Y, or Z, who is highly coveted. I don't think that would stop the Rangers, but I don't think they're going out there aggressively pursuing deals involving Danny Santana. There's plenty of value there. Whenever you're in a position to sell, whether you're going full on or just sort of, you always look at the relievers. Now, Sean Kelly's biceps injury probably is going to take him away from that sort of conversation. Jesse Chavez is interesting because he was outstanding as a reliever. He's back in that role, and he's got another year left on his deal at a pretty fair rate, I think about $4 million. But the guy who, to me, no one's really talking about is Chris Martin. He's a free agent at the end of the year, and he loves the Metroplex. Grew up in the area. I think he loves Texas. Rangers could bring him back. The guy's been outstanding. I'm not bringing up Chris Martin as a negative. I'm wondering why people aren't talking about him as much as a positive. The guy has been outstanding out of the Rangers bullpen, and so it'll be interesting to see whether his name gets thrown in the mix there in conversations. Then we talked about the Rangers outfield situation, specifically their left-handed hitters, the collection of left-handed hitters in the outfield, and perhaps having to address it, by the trade deadline. I think they'd like to. I think they'd like to be able to get Willie back up playing every day. So it'll be interesting to see if one of those guys gets moved. All right, let's get to tonight's game quickly. I might have to cough here in a second. There's that cough. All right, Marco Gonzalez against Adrian Sampson. That's a pitching matchup. Here's what we know about the Mariners. They're horrible defensively. They give up a lot of runs, but they'll score some runs on you. Not a very good team. The Rangers, even though they're struggling, having lost 7 straight, way better than Seattle. Seattle's one of the worst teams in baseball. Marco Gonzalez got off to a great start. As the Mariners got off to a great start, so did Gonzalez. He's a lefty who doesn't throw hard. But oddly, he's a lefty who struggles against lefties. So that's an advantage for the Rangers. That's a lefty-heavy group. Gonzalez is much better against righties. Righties are hitting .260 off of him with an OPS of around .738. That's below league average. Lefties hitting .316 with an OPS of around .840. That seems to be an advantage for the Rangers. Now, they're not great against soft tossers, but the soft tossers they've struggled against, left-handed soft tossers like Tommy Milone, who they'll face in this series, are guys who have success against lefties. Marco Gonzalez hasn't, and the Rangers have had success against him this year. As a matter of fact, Gonzalez's .316 batting average against lefties is the worst in Major League Baseball among left-handed pitchers, so he doesn't use that left-on-left to his advantage. One good thing is, a guy on the Rangers who's had success against lefty soft tossers is Elvis Andrus, and he hasn't had a whole lot of success here of late. He's really struggled. A lot of those meaty bats in the middle of the order for the Rangers have struggled, and Elvis is among them. He's 1 for 17 over his last few games, over this last week, without an extra base hit. And over his last 30 games, Elvis's ground ball rate is around 60%, about 15% more than what it was over the first 58 games. He's not driving the ball as much. Hopefully, that can turn around here tonight. For Adrian Sampson, we've talked about this before. Really good slider. Fastball gets exposed a lot. So it's important for him to have a good slider so he can protect his fastball. It'll be interesting to see how well he locates his fastball when he needs to use it, but how effective his slider is. All right, that's going to be it for tonight's game. We'll get more tomorrow, and as stuff involving the trade deadline continues to unfold, we will continue to be here to try and break it down for you. Rangers, Mariners, 8:30 pregame. First pitch this past 9. Talk to you then.